You know how the saying goes, the cobbler's children have no shoes? Well, I guess it's true, or at least I have no shoes to wear. It's been a while since I drove my 330 America. I've been just so busy at the shop working on everybody else's car that I haven't started it. I mean, quite honestly, it's been all summer and I haven't driven my car, and it was getting kind of gathering dust, and I said to myself, oh well, let me just fire it up and take it out for a drive today. Um, Honestly, I have to look back to see when was the last time I took her out, but it's got to be a few months. I mean, it's got to be early summer, maybe even late spring, and now it's into the fall. I hate to say it, but so I went to go start it, and you do the usual startup procedure where you pump it, or you pump up the carburetors with fuel, and then you go to start it, and it wouldn't start. So I took the carburetor tops off and looked into the carburetors, and there's no fuel. So basically what you do is you step on the accelerator, and there should be a little bit of squirting. And what's happening here is you can see that one's just drizzling out or dribbling out, and the other ones are dry. So I know there's fuel because I can hear obviously we filled the carburetor bowls up, but I guess what happened was, or I know what happened, is that the fuel just kind of evaporated and then left a residue inside those little jets. And now I'm going to have to take the tops of the carburetors out. So here we go. All right, so to take these carburetor tops off to get to the accelerator pumps, there's a couple ways to do it. You can disconnect all these top nuts and pull these banjo fittings off and take this fuel rail off. The way I do it is to just save a step, because what ends up happening, it's a little bit of a juggle, but what ends up happening is whenever you open these, because these are not leaking right now, even though mine, I have fiber washers on this, so they should seal pretty well, but the less you take those out, the better, because sometimes you just get into a whole bunch of leaks. This one probably doesn't, but just to be safe, I just disconnect it from the front and the back here. That actually leaves everything connected. And then what I do is I take the screws off the tops of the carbs. And what you can do is you can actually pull all three carburetor tops off at the same time. You just gotta kind of be gentle with it. Watch the gasket, it doesn't hang up, and there you go. You take everything out, and that's how you get the fuel rail out. Then you carefully drop everything back in. You only have to disconnect the tops of the carbs. So that's a little trick. All right, with the carb tops out of the way, see if we can get you in here, and you expose the tops of the carburetors. So this is the accelerator pump squirters. So I know the middle one was working. So when you pull this plunger out, you can see it squirting pretty well. And then this one here, it looks like it's squirting. But this one clogged, and you can see it trying to force its way out, but something's up with that. Also, what's bothersome to me is look at the trash inside the bowl. I got to find out why. Maybe it's time for a new fuel filter. I think my filter is time to replace it, but I'll take care of that in a minute. Let's work on taking this thing apart. So the accelerator pump just comes off just like that. And what we can do is, once we get that out of there, watch out for the gaskets. With that out of the way, you can actually check to see if it's pumping at all. And that looks like it's coming. Oh, something's... Okay, that's not working right. So let's pull this gasket off. Find out why this thing is jammed up in here. It could be some kind of trash in the spring. So what I'm going to do, pop this off. See what's going on there. Sometimes it's just a little piece of trash inside there. Take a peek inside. I think I'm going to clean that out. Feel right. Yeah. Something's not right there. Got a lot of trash in there for some reason. Try to get a better look inside that plunger area. Get some of that old fuel out of there. If you could smell this, you would smell just stale fuel. I mean, it's, even though I can get non-ethanol fuel in here, it's still been several months since I've driven this car, unfortunately. So it's kind of stinky and stale. It's time to, once I get this accelerator pump back up and happening, just see if there's any trash in there. Pull out some of this stuff too. See, look at that. There's just trash. A little bit of rust and stuff in there. I think it's just making its way into the accelerator pump just a little bit. Just, it's actually not huge pieces of trash. I think it's just sitting there. Get rid of this. All right, let's take a look. See where that plunger freed up at all. That's better. There. That's what I want to see. All right, next step is to clean this thing out. See, this is the little squirter. It's going to take a peek, see if I can get light through it. If I can see light through it, then it'll work. Oh, that looks pretty good. There, so I don't know if you could see that, but it's squirting out. All right, put this gasket back on. Let's try to see if we can grab some of this trash that's, I don't know if it's trash, but I think it's just like a little bit of residue at the bottom of the fuel bowl. I mean, that's what the fuel bowl does, is it kind of collects it all, but I think it'll be okay. Kind of want to get my car back on the road as opposed to disassembling and anything. I'm going to run it, see what happens. Let's put the fuel rail back. So the trick with this is just to be careful when you're putting this back in, because you don't want to bend the floats. So what you're doing is you're gently getting everything lined up, and because they were all lined up because of the fuel rail, it should go back the same way it came out without jamming or binding up on anything, because the fuel rail kind of locates everything. So we'll start all these screws. Now I know it's not any really, just a random order I'm doing it, I know. Probably should start from the front, work my way back. It's probably the best way to do it. The other reason why I tend to take the fuel rail out is because these carburetors are getting to be, well, they're more than 50 years old. And what happens is they're made out of this cast alloy that actually is pretty soft. So what ends up happening is every time you unscrew these things, I tend to think they just get weaker and weaker. And the less you have to do it, the better. I mean, there's no way you can clean that kind of stuff out without taking these screws out. But what ends up happening is if you don't have to do it, you try to avoid it, because when one of these screws strip, you've got a whole bunch of other issues where you have to like do an insert. You have to, the best thing probably for these carburetors, as opposed to using helicoils, is time certs. You have to have the right pitch to do it, or the right insert to do it. And you know, it's just a lot of work, you know, and if you can avoid doing it by just trying to skip the step of stripping and unstripping. This thing has a brass insert, so they're not as bad, but there are certain carburetors on a Ferrari, DFI comes to mind, that doesn't have an insert. So you're screwing the banjo fitting right into the aluminum alloy, and I tell you, those things strip so easily, and there's not a lot of material up there to put an insert in. So a lot of guys, you know, I get a phone call from somebody, hey, what do I do? I went to tighten the banjo fitting, and it's now stripped. What do I do? And you know, that's gonna take machine work, and you know, you can send it out and get it done, but it's just, you know, if you can avoid doing it, just got to be careful. I mean, yeah, you got to tighten it. You got to tighten it so it doesn't leak. But if you over tighten it and you strip it, that's worse. Now you have a car that's not even running. I mean, I don't think it runs anyway if it's leaking, but if it's stripped, then you got to take the carburetor apart, take the top off. You got to find somebody who's a competent, and that's the other problem, is finding a competent machine shop that can set it up and has the insert to do it, or you know, you have to buy it. It's a pretty big pitch, you know, so you have to buy them special and have them do it, and then it's got to be square to the fitting so that it seals, because it's not even just putting in seals or putting in threads. It's got to seal. So it can really be a nightmare if you strip those. So not that this one's that bad, but it also saves you from chasing leaks, because you know, you put this whole thing back together and then all of a sudden the banjos are leaking. So then you have to chase that down, and you know, it kind of changes also because when you're doing this for a customer, it's like these are the things that take, you know, so much time. It's not so much as like, you know, it's relatively easy stuff, but another trick is these things strip really easily, so you got to be really careful. You got to just make sure you don't cross thread it. It is fine pitch, so you just got to, even then you have to be really careful here to make sure that it is definitely threaded correctly before you start turning it in. This one is still loose. Let me just see what we got. And you just get it just snug, so you check it. Then let's check for leaks. Just looking over this thing, make sure I got everything back together correctly. I'm going to turn on the fuel pump and let's see what we got. Here's the fuel pump filling the bowls. Fuel's coming from back here, and it's coming up through here, filling up each of these, and you can hear it filling the bowls. I got squirt. I got squirt. I bet you she'll fire over right now. Oh, that worked. All right, let me put the rest of it back together. Well, now I can go for my drive. Well, since I got her out and started now, maybe it's time I give you a little quick tour of this car. It's a little dirty, just like I said, it's on the list of washing today or sometime in the next couple days. I really just need to get it out and drive it, especially with that fuel issue. But I guess we can start on the inside just a little bit. So 250, or this is 330 America, so very similar to a GTE. This is what they would consider a Series 3 GTE. So it's the last series of the GTEs, but they put a 4-liter V12 engine in it. So that's what makes it a 330 America, because instead of a 250 GTE, which was a 3-liter, as the old Ferrari story goes, 250 GTO, 250 short wheelbase, 250 GTE, all had the same engine, 3-liter V12. So it's 250 cc's times 12 gets you 3 liters. So 330 cc's times 12 gets 4 liters. So that's why this is called a 330 America. It's the same layout as a GTE, this car. I mean, there really isn't any outward signs that it's a GT or a 330 America, except for the tag on the trunk lid. But inside, it's pretty much GTE. 60s ergonomics, especially Ferrari. It's kind of funny from the seating position. If you look here, most of the gauges are usually obscured. You can't really see anything. I mean, if you're sitting up here, which kind of puts you a little too high. I mean, this is where I am. This is my eye level, and I'm kind of, you know, tall enough to fit in this car, or not too short. You know, I'm about 5'10", long torso, but you know, again, I feel like I'm an average height person, and when you sit at regular height, a lot of the gauges are blocked. But you know, that's just the way it is. The other thing that's kind of annoying about a GTE is look how close the windshield is. You know, you reach out and touch the windshield. A little weird. I mean, they did this just simply so that they can get more passenger space. It's a 2+2, so they moved everything a little bit further forward. So the windshield tends to be a little close. But you know, it's full set of gauges. Oil pressure in the center, which I guess is never obscured because that's pretty important. This little blue light is the overdrive. So what we do is we have a stalk over here, and that turns on the overdrive and turns off the overdrive, and that blue light turns on to tell you that the overdrive is on. It's an electric overdrive. It's what they call a Laycock to Normanville overdrive, used a lot on Austin Healey's and a lot of British cars. It's basically an overdrive unit that you put on the back side of the transmission, and when you go into overdrive, you just hit the button or you hit the lever, and then it goes into overdrive. It makes this car really comfortable as a highway cruiser, because it drops the revs, I think, around 800 RPM. I think I'm not sure, but it certainly drops it so that it makes driving, you're not running at like 4,000 RPM on the highway. You know, the other gauges just kind of go across. Series 3 GTEs and cars put the vent controls down on the center console. There's a radio. Usually they came with Blaupunkts. This car came with the original radio. It actually works, I think. At least I checked it many years ago. It's a tube Blaupunk, which is kind of cool. You turn it on and let it warm up, and then it kind of starts to, just like an old tube radio, kind of turns on and makes that noise. The pedals are floor hinged, so very similar to Porsche. So some people don't like them, but you know, it's the way you know, they were. Later on, 330s, they started going with the upper hinged pedals, very similar to, you know, every modern car from that day forward. But these early cars had pedals that were hinged from below. You know, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, you sit here and, you know, you can drive it pretty well. The pedals are nice and closely spaced. You know, same thing. You know, you can adjust these pedals, which is really nice. You can adjust the height from behind, and you can also adjust the accelerator pedal as well. So you can really adjust these so that, you know, it can fit your driving style. You know, I have these lined up pretty well so that when you're hard on the brake, you can reach over and blip the gas pedal for you know, a real comfortable heel and toe. So that's that. The rest of the interior is pretty nice. A lot of leather. I mean, I'll tell you, when I did the interior on this car, any 2+2, I always tell them it's a minimum of 5 hides, maybe even 6. It's a lot of leather in this car. When you look at all the back seats, the rear panels, the door panels, all that stuff with pockets and all these little things. I mean, it actually is more expensive to do one of these interiors than it is to do something like a Lusso or short wheelbase. There's not a lot of interior. In a Lusso, the whole rear panel is vinyl. With the GTEs or the 2+2s, it's all leather. The center console is leather. The transmission tunnel cover is leather. It's a lot of leather in here. And so unfortunately, I mean, or fortunately, these cars are going up in value, so people are willing to spend the money to do the interior. But back in the day, 20-30 years ago, it was not good to tell people how expensive it was to do an interior when the cars weren't really worth that much. But that's just what it is with a 2+2. The engine is a V12 4-liter Colombo designed engine. It's larger than the 3-liter engines that originally came in the 250 GTEs, but Ferrari took the last 50 examples of or bodies of the GTE and shoehorned this 4-liter engine. A lot of stories about whether or not they had already started making the larger engine and they still had 50 bodies left from Pininfarina. But whatever the case, there are only 50 of these cars with the 4-liter engine. It's a larger engine, a lot more torque than the 250. So that's kind of like the neat thing about having a 330 America. It's rarity and more power. Thanks for watching.